Hi everyone. Today we'll be making a German chocolate cake. This is a very often requested cake. I make it several times a year. This is actually the one I always make my dad for his birthday. I know you saw me just make cupcakes for his birthday, but that was for our family party with my big extended family. And this is for our actual small family, our immediate family birthday party on his actual birthday. So anyways, let's get started. I'm going to be doing this as a half-size recipe because I'm making it in these smaller pans instead of the larger ones. So these smaller pans, I believe they're 5-inch pans, but they allow me to make half of a regular 9-inch size cake. And so it's just the four of us tonight, so I don't want a massive cake that we're going to have all these leftovers from. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And it calls for 2 cups of sugar. I need half of that, but I also am going to use slightly less. So in baking with your sugar amounts, you can typically use a quarter of the amount of sugar less than what is called for and still get the same texture but less sugar. So I'm going to use half a cup there and then a quarter cup, and this is golden sugar, so the less processed sugar. And then it calls for 1 3/4 cups of flour. Again, I need to half that. Okay, that's my flour. Then cocoa powder. And I'll put this recipe in the description for you so that you have all the amounts. Hopefully I have enough cocoa powder. It's gonna be a close one. Yeah, we'll have enough for the cake. Okay. Ooh, runaway jar. Sorry about that. That was probably a very unpleasant sound. Okay. Then I need baking powder and baking soda. I need 1 1/2 teaspoons of each, so half of that means I need 3/4 of a teaspoon. This is a very quick cake to put together because you don't have to pull out your mixer. You don't need anything crazy, no crazy equipment. I need 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then I'm going to whisk that up just to get everything combined. So the recipe actually says, of course, to put this in a separate bowl and then to mix all your liquids together in a separate bowl and gently add them together. I don't bake like that. I like an all-in-one method. So I will make kind of a little well here. I need 1 egg. And I don't crack my eggs in another container. Just don't do it. You can if you want to. The chocolate was making me think that there was a shell in there, but there isn't. Rinse my hands real quick. right. Eggs are done. Then I need half a cup of buttermilk. So this is heavy whipping cream with that tiny bit of vinegar in it. And you can see how it's gotten frothy and kind of separated. And that's what you want to happen. I'm using heavy whipping cream for a couple of reasons. One, heavy whipping cream has way less sugar in it than regular milk does. And two, I want the added fat content because I took out some of the sugar. So I want some of the moisture from that fat content. It shouldn't be a problem, but nothing's worse than a dry chocolate cake. Next, I need a teaspoon of vanilla. We're just gonna eyeball that. We're gonna call that a teaspoon. Then I need a 1/4 cup of oil. So this is again another one of those cakes that doesn't take any butter. I tend to prefer oil-based cakes. They tend to stay together better. You get a better crumb texture, I think. It also tends to stay more moist, which is never a bad thing. So I'm going to turn my tap on behind me and get the water really hot, because the next part is that I need half a cup of boiling water. Alright, we're nice and hot. Oh, that was lucky. Exactly half a cup. Alright, we add that in. We're going to give this a whisk. Be gentle at this stage or you'll get chocolate water everywhere. So you'll see it's kind of thick and chunky down in there. You want to give it a whisk until it's nice and incorporated and smooth. Get all the sides really well. Basically looks like chocolate pudding at this point. Alright, next thing is to bring over my pans, which I'm going to spray with this stuff. I know it's bad for you, bad for the environment. It's just what gets me the best results at the moment. So that's what I'm going to use. Always make sure that you spray your pans over something like your sink. Don't do it over your stove. Don't do it over your floors. Stove because it'll catch on fire. Floors because it's oil. It's going to be slick. So, next thing I like to do, and excuse the state of it, but I like to take my scale, make sure I zero it. This is how I make sure I get them nice and even. And I'm going to switch to a spatula at this point to make sure I've gotten everything incorporated well. There won't be any crunchy bits I don't want. All right, looks good. Okay. We'll see how close we are. It's 207. I was not close. This bit can take a little time sometimes. Once you get good at it, you make this a lot, and something I should do is put the weight amount onto my recipe so that I know how much it's going to be. You don't have to be this precise. I'm going to make this into a layer cake, so it's easier for me if they're more precise. They also will cook more evenly, which is always good. Alright, we'll get this last little bit into this one. You know I have to get every drop out, so bear with me while I do that. Alright, so let's see. This one, 314. This one, 313. Man, we were close. Look, watch. Okay. Are we going to be even? Yes. Alright, so they are exactly the same weight now. And you can see... So you have some little bubbles in there. That's fine. It's not going to bother anything. The white over here is just the baking spray. So now I'm going to put them in my oven at 375. It's already preheated. And they're going to bake for 25 to 35 minutes. I'm going to check them at 25 and we'll see from there. Alright, so now we're on to the filling part, which this is kind of the main characteristic of a German chocolate cake, and that is this coconut pecan filling / topping that's used. So you need a 1/4 cup of butter. Remember, this is for the half size recipe. I need a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. And a 1/4 cup of brown sugar. My pan here is over the heat, and it is on medium. And I'm going to let all of this melt together. While keeping an eye on it. You don't want it to burn. Let that butter get to melting. Then I'm going to add 1 egg yolk. It actually should be 1 1/2 egg yolks, but I don't know how you get a half a yolk, so I'm not going to do that. I almost messed up and put the whole yolk in there. I mean, the whole egg in there. That would have been bad. Give that a quick stir, since it's trying to go crazy. Let me rinse my egg hands. Then I need, it calls for 3/4 cup of evaporated milk, but I'm going to use heavy whipping cream instead. just because I want to and can. So that means I need 1/4 plus a little bit. So put the 1/4 in here. All right. And we'll dump that in. And now I'm going to let everything mix together. And I'm going to stir this for several minutes until my butter is all melted and this starts getting thicker. So now that this has gotten thicker, you can see this definitely has more texture to it now. Coating the spoon. Now I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. And 1/2 cup of sweetened shredded coconut. Give that a mix. And then 1/2 cup of chopped pecans. And I had someone help me do my pantry restock last time, and they mixed my quartered and sliced pecans with my chopped ones. So I have to go through and sort them out because nobody wants to chomp down on that in this kind of recipe. So take these big ones out. I do once a month, once every couple months, do a big pantry restock. If that's something you'd like to see, let me know and I can make sure that I film that next time. Put those right there. It looks like they're all down in the bottom. I'm making a mess, but we'll clean it up later. And I didn't realize before I went to grab these that this was an issue. So you're getting to hang out with me while I fix it. Oh, by the way, my cakes have come out of the oven. They actually only took 18 minutes. And one of the big ways that you can tell if a cake is ready is by the smell. So if you start smelling the cake, so if it starts smelling like the cake is done, then it is done. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you get to baking enough, you'll recognize that. And so while I was working on this, I actually started smelling that and I was like, wait a minute, are we sure the cake's going to take 25 minutes? So good thing I checked because they were absolutely ready. And I'll show them to you here in a second. I'm still working on my little pecans over here. But the beautiful thing about this recipe, and I don't think I was distracted earlier and I don't think I conveyed it properly, but the beautiful thing about these little 4 or 5 inch pans is that they are exactly half the size of a 9-inch cake. So you just put just take the recipe and have it and cut it in half, and that means that you now have exactly the same cake, just in miniature, which is great. It's also really easy to just cut that in half, no big deal. But the other thing I will say is that this then makes the perfect cake for, I would say, probably 6 to 8 people. So like for tonight, there'll be 4 of us and we will have enough left over for 1 more serving, for those who would like to have it. All right, so there's my pecans. There are some in there a little bit bigger, but they'll be all right. I'm actually going to turn the heat back on for these for just a little bit. It's a little bit thinner than I want it to be. And to kind of get a toast on this coconut and the pecans. This is what our finished cake looks like. Nice and solid there. Hasn't done any sinking. Now we're just going to set those aside and let them cool for a few minutes. And then I'll tip them out onto a cooling rack and let them cool down. I want them to cool completely before I do any decorating of them. Let's see how this is looking. So I'm going to give this probably another 2 minutes and get it nice and thick, and then I'll set this to the side, let it cool to room temperature, and then I'll stick it in the fridge until I'm ready to assemble my cake. Alright, so next thing, of course, is your chocolate icing. So I have a 1/4 cup or half a stick of softened butter, and you want that to be nice and soft. Alright, and to that I'm going to add 1/3 cup of cocoa. Oops, sorry. Then I'm going to add 1 cup of powdered sugar. It calls for 1.5 cups of powdered sugar, but I'm going to start with 1 cup and see what I think of the texture. Because I don't want it too thick. And then I need, where'd my, need 1/2 cup of evaporated milk, but I'm using heavy whipping cream. And we're gonna mix this all together. My butter probably could have been a little bit softer. So don't add any moisture just yet. Give yourself some time. I'm going to switch to a spatula because I can see that this isn't going to work. Oops. So this is part of the fun. I'm getting all of this out. There needs to be I actually think there is something you can buy that you put on this end of your whisk that allows you to then push down and take all of this off of it. But that requires, number one, having it, but then also having the foresight to know you're going to need it and put it on there, because it probably doesn't just live on your whisk, I wouldn't think. Alright. Close enough. Now, let's try this again. You can see we get a little bit on the counter here. But see how it's getting kind of a frosting consistency there? Making like a paste. Now, Gonna add some more of our milk. I prefer a looser frosting just because I know this is going to be refrigerated at least for a little while. And when you refrigerate, everything gets a little bit drier. Oops, I'm going to make a big mess if I'm not careful. You can absolutely do this with your mixer. And I probably should have, but I like, for some reason, doing things the hard way. But I think I will pull out my mixer so I can make this more of a whipped texture. So I'll be right back. Alright, let's give this a try. So I have my immersion blender, and it has this little whisk attachment on the bottom. I've never tried this before, but I'm going to give it a go and see how it works. Usually I would pull out my mixer, but I'm being lazy. Oh yeah. I just got chocolate icing everywhere. I'm gonna add a little more liquid. I have to say, definitely a fan of the immersion blender whisk. That's a cool little contraption. So we're gonna scrape all of our icing that went everywhere down where it needs to be mixed. Sorry, I keep hitting the camera. It's down in a bad place today. Alright, now let's give it a whisk and see what happens. Alright. Oh, and I wanted to add a pinch of salt. It's not in the recipe, but I always like to have sweet and savory together. Alright, let's see what happens. Ready? I've already gotten chocolate in several places it shouldn't be, but let's see. Oh, that was bad. Let's see if we can slow it down, maybe. Alright. Alright, I think we're good. Sufficiently made a mess. Like my arm and my hand from blocking it. Okay, so, cool little toy. You use a bigger bowl. And maybe a guard like you have on your stand mixer. But anyways, this is the texture you're looking for. Nice and smooth. It's gonna be a little bit grainy looking, and that's just how this is. It doesn't have a lot of butter in it, so it's not that your butter has split. It's just because using sugars and things that just are more grainy. But I found when you chill it, it does get a little bit more smooth. Alright, so I think we're good in that department. I'm gonna now start to assemble everything. Okay, now comes the fun part, assembly. So, what I'm gonna do is take, let's see, I gotta decide which one is which one is the most stable looking. Alright, so we're gonna put first cake on. So I have this little cake pan on the bottom there. Cake, I guess it's kind of a plate, and I have it on my turntable, which you don't have to have. You can do this on a counter without any issues. The next thing I'm gonna do is make sure that this is flat instead of domed. It has a slight dome, so I'm going to take my knife and gently, this is a pretty soft textured cake, so you have to be gentle. And then we just take this off. I'm going to put it over here in a pan because someone will eat the crumbs. So now it's nice and flat and you can see the beautiful texture inside, nice and light. Then I'm going to take some of my coconut and pecan mixture and put right in the middle. This is really stiff because I put it in the freezer for a few minutes. And we'll put a nice layer in the middle. Let's see, that might be enough. You can put a layer of icing under this if you wanted to, if you needed this cake to keep a little bit longer. I'm actually going to use my fingers. You can put a layer of icing on the cake first to protect the layer a little bit. But I know this is going to be eaten very soon, so I'm not too worried about that. Now you don't want to get your filling too close to the edge, because when you put the top on, the top. When you put the next layer of cake on, you don't want it to squish out and get into your outside frosting. Okay, so next step is taking your other layer of cake and sitting it right on top, like so. Actually, I think I can do, I'm going to take it off for a second. Maybe not. Yeah. I'm going to add a little bit more of the frosting because I can go around the edges a little bit more. You obviously can do this with a palette knife or a spoon or however you want to do it, but I find that when it gets cold like this and really stiff, that it's easier to just use my fingers, and they will wash. I washed them before I started this, and I can wash them again afterwards. It's no big deal. I do have a little bit of issue touching food like this, but it's okay. No worries. Alright, so that looks better. So that I don't have to put so much frosting to fill in the gap. And you also want to try and smooth out the middle. You don't want a big dome in the middle of your filling, because that's just gonna make your cake look funny when you do your layers. So we'll add our second layer on top. And this is a very fragile cake today. Probably because I'm kind of rushing its process, but that's okay. We're gonna fill in. There's a couple spots where the cake broke away a little bit, getting it out of the pan. Okay, so this is pretty flat, so I'm not gonna worry with cutting the top. I'm gonna leave it how it is. So our next step, let me wash my hands real quick. Okay, our next step is to get the frosting on here. So I'm gonna take my bowl of frosting and just gonna dollop it right on top like so, and I'll save a little bit to the side. Then we'll take our palette knife. This is one with an angle to it, and we're just gonna smooth it around. Let's get it down the sides. And you can see that little bit of a grainy texture. It doesn't taste grainy or feel grainy when you eat it. It's just the way it looks. And I'll show you a trick when I get finished of how you can smooth it up a little bit at the end. All right, so that's, you don't want a whole lot of frosting on top because we are going to put a little bit more of that coconut mixture on top. All right, so now it's starting to go down the sides, which is perfect. That's what I want it to do. So I'm going to start encouraging it down and then using my turntable. Ooh, except it wants to run. I have a couple spots where, because I use less sugar this time, the cake is not holding up as well. Needed to freeze these layers first. So, note to self, if you do want to use less sugar in the recipe, like I cut that 1/4 cup of sugar out of the dry mix, if you do that, make sure you have plenty of time for your cake to cool, and then also give it a little bit of time in the freezer, because it's making a softer cake, which is making this part a little difficult. Luckily, my dad is not a picky client by any means, so he won't be judging my icing capabilities, which is nice. I'm definitely a perfectionist, so it bothers me that it's not working well, but it is what it is. It's just something I have to get over. So I've got a big break on this side. So definitely, I would say, stick to the original recipe. Don't try and take any sugar out of it. It just doesn't work. Unless you want a hot mess later. And I don't know. Alright. Try and get this really cold. Try and finish it up so that it has enough time to get cold before I have to take it. That way, maybe it will, the icing will hold that together. I'll show you here in a second down where I'm talking about. All right, I think, let's see, got a little more icing. Usually I will pipe some rosettes on top of this, make it kind of fancy, but I'm just not feeling that today, so it's just going to be a simple, old-fashioned German chocolate cake. No mess, No frills. Well, lots of mess, but no extra frilliness. Because honestly, these old traditional cakes, I like them better when they're more traditional. So simple and not so overdone. All right, now let's see if we can hide the mistakes a little better. Let this go down. I do find with this recipe, a lot of times cake recipes and cupcake recipes will give you will have you making way more frosting than you need. I find with this recipe that this is the perfect amount of frosting. That it actually is true to the amount you need. Thanks for bearing with me while I'm doing this. I kind of wanted to show you in real time so that you had an idea of how long it kind of takes to do the decorating, the putting together and decorating part. Alright, so got it nice. I'm gonna go one more time around the edge just because I can. Still got this one spot that's being silly. Okay. That looks pretty good to me. And then the next thing is to wash my hands. That chocolate icing is delicious, in case you were wondering. Alright, now I'm going to scrape out all of this, the rest of this coconut part, and we'll put it right on top. I'm certain I will be making this cake again not too long from now, and I will make sure when I do it that time that I do the fancy icing work and everything so that you can see it. But like said, today's not that day. We're just getting simple, tasty cake today. Alright, now get that out perfectly. Alright, so let me wash my hands and then I'll show you from the side what this looks like. Oops, I do see one thing I need to fix. No, that'll be okay. Alright, so keep in mind it's on this turntable, which is a hot mess now. And let me show you. All right. So this is what we look like from the side. So smooth-ish, not super smooth. Like I said, trying to do a rustic cake here. You can see where it dips down right here. This is where I have a break in the cake. So it got, one of the layers got a little bit stuck in the pan because I didn't let it cool long enough before I tried to take it out. And so I have a little bit of breakage there that I've covered with icing. But it will still eat. It'll still be delicious. Just kind of annoying that it looks like that. But there's your final product. A German chocolate cake.